Hello, my beautiful patriots and truth seekers. This April 29th, 2021 tweet by Invisible Nobody was the inspiration for today's video. Not this message, not this image, these two images. I'll read this. The theories were many. Did someone at the Defense Department sell off part of the military's vast collection of sought-after IP addresses as Trump left office? Had the Pentagon finally acted on demands to unload the billions of dollars worth of IP address space the military has been sitting on, largely unused for decades? The answer, of sorts, came Friday. The change is the handiwork of an elite Pentagon unit known as the Defense Digital Service, which reports directly to the Secretary of Defense. The DDS bills itself as the SWAT team of nerds, tasked with solving emergency problems for the department and conducting experimental work to make big technological leaps for the military. That unsourced post alluded to this Ars Technica article, which basically has the headline, Pentagon explains odd transfer 175 million IP addresses to obscure company. Just days ago, it was determined that for some reason, a number of IP addresses were transferred just the day before Trump left office in January. In the text of that article, you would find the Defense Department says it still owns the addresses, but is using a third-party company in a pilot project to conduct research. So what comes to mind is the notion that the reason the IP addresses were transferred for research relates to some secret military operation that implicates the recent election of November 2020. Now, while this top image is interesting, it is not going to be the focus for this video. Instead, it's this bottom one. I'll read it to you. The 305th is housed within the 111th. Flynn formerly commanded the 111th. 4% of all internet IPs transferred to Global Resource Systems LLC moments before Trump left office. And this relates to the article I just showed you. GRS owns the IP address 11.11.18. After you-know-who went dark for the first time for 93 days, the IP of the board was 11.11.18. Now, when it mentioned the board, it's talking about the source for all of these posts, a specific website. This website, which I'm perusing now, simply aggregates the posts from that website called the board. Fort Huachuca is 160 miles from Maricopa.
Long has reveille echoed across the lofty peaks of the Huachuca Mountains, which rise out of the San Pedro Valley in southeastern Arizona. Nestled in Huachuca Canyon is Fort Huachuca.
I will return to this. The 305th has been known to be referred to as the Kraken. As an added bonus, the current commanding officer of the 305th has the last name Fear Now. Here's a Wikipedia listing for the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion with its named battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel TJ Fear Now. Let me translate this for you. Patriots have it all. Enjoy the show. So this post was made on the 29th of April. So prior to seeing that tweet earlier in the day, I had watched an episode of Tori Says Show, and there's a segment where the following tidbit of interesting information is revealed.
Gary Hartley, behavior and body language expert, former U.S. Army interrogator. It makes me nervous just talking to you. You know, what are you seeing in me? What am I doing wrong? Do I got a guilty conscience? Who knows? All right. Greg, thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you for your time.
So usually most interrogations are taught at a school that I went through, and I have to say that a lot of people of my family have went through in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where you learn how to be an interrogator and to read people's faces.
So you caught that. Apparently, Tori, as well as some members of her family, received a particular training in facial reading at Fort Huachuca. But the thing is, Fort Huachuca is a military settlement with military housing.
1,000 service members and their families. Fort Huachuca is home. The post has about 1,100 housing units.
So you can do a Google search for who is Tori. The first link is this web page for Duluth News Tribune. I do not generally recommend Google for search terms. I wonder if the search engine purposely surfaces this particular link to Tori because it deals with a controversial issue such as the election. And the article in its tone appears to cast Tori in somewhat of a negative light, but we'll go ahead and click on the article here. So this article identifies her as a former North Dakota blogger, further describing her as a Trump supporter and prolific podcaster blogger. The article writer try to cast a particular narrative framing Tori by drawing upon history of a controversy she was apparently involved with. This involved a claim of donation embezzlement, also describing action by the North Dakota Attorney General Wayne Steinaham against her in 2017. Very interestingly, Tori secured the support of David Thompson, a Democrat attorney who actually ran against the Attorney General in 2018. So in other words, she acquired a defense attorney who was like a rival to the North Dakota Attorney General, and despite being a Democrat, it appears this guy has some glowing things to say about her. Tori is a unique character. She covers a lot of ground, and a lot of it is controversial. Some of what she says is verifiable, and some may not be, but in her own mind, she operates in good faith. In Tori's lengthy affidavit, which was used by Sidney Powell in her case for that special topic, which sadly enough cannot even be mentioned on YouTube, Tori identifies herself in the following way. I have been a private contractor with experience gathering and analyzing foreign intelligence and acted as a localizer during the deployment of projects and operations both OCONUS and CONUS. I am a trained cryptolinguist, hold a completed degree in molecular and cellular physiology, and have formal training in other sciences such as computational linguistics, game theory, algorithmic aspects of machine learning, and predictive and analytics, among others. When she uses the acronym OCONUS and CONUS, she's referring to CONUS being the contiguous United States, so that's the 48 states that are connected. OCONUS meaning outside the continental United States. So that's including like Alaska and Hawaii, as well as the other extra continental U.S. jurisdictions. She claims to have over 2 decades of mathematical modeling and pattern analysis as a cryptographer. She has this interesting statement. In my position from 1999 to 2014, I was responsible for delegating implementation via contractors with U.S. or Nine Eyes agencies identifying connectivity, networking, and subcontractors that would manage the macro operations. Very confusing sentence, but I take away from it that she had some role in organizing networks of subcontractors to manage micro operations, whatever those are. The fact that she had a position from 1999 sort of indicates her age as being likely over 40. Her affidavit then goes on to explain a problem with lapsing Election Assistance Commission or EAC accreditation for a few voting system laboratories. The takeaway from this investigation is I could not find any specific information demonstrating that Tori is a veteran, which would then explain her presence at Fort Huachuca. But this uncertainty about Tori's connection to the 305th Military Battalion really reflect my own ignorance in ways specific military brigades interact with outside contractors. So here's an image of Tori, who's a claimed contractor. I pulled up this video simply YouTube searching Tori Says. Is she in any way related to this man who is also a claimed contractor, but in this case for the DIA? Was Austin Steinbart at Fort Huachuca? Did he interact with the 305th? Just briefly going back to this video, I watched a little bit of it and I found this interview's topic on KX4 somewhat intriguing. Essentially, Tori sent a Facebook message to an individual named Ruth Anna Buffalo saying, I think this person needs to be investigated. She cannot go around advocating for a woman we've discovered committed immigration F. She may be Native American, but Native American children go missing all the time. I hope Ruth knows that is my forte, because one thing I've realized is that everyone has a price. Hashtag on it. And so Miss Buffalo had taken this message as a direct threat to her children, since Native American children were mentioned as going missing, and apparently Miss Buffalo is Native American. I have not seen the full context of the conversation between the two individuals, but just looking at this specific message, I, as like a unbiased third-party observer, can agree that I would likely have concern if I was Ruth and read this message, particularly with the language, I hope Ruth knows that is my forte. Now, if this sentence was moved up, like after the first sentence, I think Ruth should be investigated. I hope Ruth knows that is my forte. I think that would be fine. But instead, this sentence, I hope Ruth knows that is my forte, appears after the sentence, She may be Native American, but the Native American children go missing all the time. And so coming after that sentence, it implies that Tori has connections to some syndicate that can make children go missing. And then followed by, because one thing I've realized is that everyone has a price, further casts a framing of a sinister financial transaction that would lead to the disappearance of children. In this interview, Tori claims that the post was completely taken out of context and that's not what she meant at all. But from my perspective, I really wouldn't be caught dead making any kind of message with this type of language to anybody. The implied connections notwithstanding, this type of message at least shows Tori to be a somewhat provocative individual. In that case, not much different than Austin, who in some of his videos have made some rather provocative statements as well. Having no evidence, I would not accuse Tori nor Austin of being anything more than provocateurs. But with these kinds of people, it may be difficult getting to the true character. The various controversies, the inherent bluster can shield one from reaching unbiased conclusions. Okay, so now I'm on Ruboss's YouTube channel. This individual is not really a debunker, but this particular video is a Frankfurt server rate debunking video. There was a very interesting segment where the 305th Battalion is mentioned. So I'll go ahead and play that segment.
The raid, he says this.
Wait a minute.
It's been on the deep state side.
Let me just stop you there, General, because you just said something very interesting. You just said that who has just opened up the Kraken, and then you just described what the Kraken was. We all know the term because of Sidney Powell using it, but you just said what it is. Can you back up on that?
Yes. Sidney got the term Kraken because that's the nickname of the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion.
So what he's saying is that when Sidney Powell talked about releasing the Kraken, she was actually referring to this one specific battalion. The problem is that this battalion's mission is to train intelligence analysts. That is, it exists to teach trainees how to evaluate satellite images and other information and pass that on to the troops. These aren't actually people who do this stuff. These are people in classrooms who teach other people in classrooms how to do this stuff.
And that's the big question. Is the 305th Battalion an exclusive destination for boot camp trainees to learn intelligence gathering basics? Or is it involved with protecting the United States information infrastructure? Does it recruit civilian contractors such as Tor and teach them face reading? Is the intelligence organization Colonel Phil Waldron involved with also cooperating with the 305th Battalion?
Colonel and gentlemen, ladies, my name is Phil Waldron. I'm a retired Army Colonel, 30 years. Spent the first half of my career just like Colonel Mastriano here as a cavalry officer conducting armed reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance. Last half of my career spent in information warfare as a psychological operations officer and information operations officer. Conducted computer network operations, electronic warfare, special electronic warfare, deception, counter-deception, and OPSEC, and a couple other specialties.
Specifically note he said deception and counter-deception. Given the reliance on these tactics in today's age of asymmetrical warfare, it really would be unsurprising if there were a veil of obscuration and classification preventing civilians such as myself from understanding the true degree of interaction the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion could have with other facilities operating signals intelligence, to also include individual contractors. The 305th's motto is ad arcana tatanda, to keep official secrets safe. Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Juan O'Savin, Austin Steinbart, Tori, and others, all of these individuals could be using tactics of deception and counter-deception with provocation and seemingly inaccurate predictions to an actually altruistic end. The confusion itself becomes a barrier that then protects the secret covert operation, but providing civilians such as myself enough valuable crumbs to not fall into despair during the artificial NWO tribulation period that has to manifest before the corruption is ultimately cleaned out. Assuming World War III is already ongoing, many of these apparently funny characters who burst onto the scene spring of last year could simply be the chosen visible manifestations of an otherwise hidden sequence of moves and countermoves of two opposing sides in a new generation of indirect, irregular warfare. I believe this period of April to September will be the cool down to reality of the situation. Anyways, I've gone on for too long. Peace.